Usually when you look at an airspace map, you kind of expect the boundaries to stay, well, somewhat static.
Right, yeah, like they don't move around a lot.
Exactly. The Class B airspace around major airports, it just sits where it sits. And the military operation areas, they're already established.
Sure.
But if you look at the commercial drone airspace map right now, I mean, it's like someone's just violently redrawing the lines in real time.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild out there right now.
It really is. Like, we are simultaneously being told exactly where we absolutely cannot fly, while at the exact same moment, being handed the regulatory keys to fly further than we ever have before.
Yeah, it's a massive contradiction.
It is. So welcome to the Red Raven UAS podcast.
Before we jump in, for anyone joining us for the first time, I just want to quickly say who we are. Red Raven UAS provides customized drone training, program development, and expert consulting.
At Red Raven, we work with public safety, utilities, and enterprise teams. And our focus is really on one thing: helping you launch and grow a drone program that's safe, compliant, and actually ready for your mission. We do the consulting, the strategy, and the hands-on training that turns an idea into a real operational tool.
Visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification, and check out the current special pricing on our Part 107 course.
This is the weekly briefing for May 9, 2026.
And this is explicitly geared toward, commercial operators, enterprise program managers, and public safety teams who really need to make sense of this shifting sky.
Right, because you have to navigate this. We've got a massive stack of recent FAA dockets, FCC filings, and this major strategic push from the wireless industry. We're going to figure out exactly where the industry is heading.
Because, it is basically the defining paradox of commercial aviation right now.
Oh, for sure.
The Federal Aviation Administration is actively closing the skies around critical infrastructure, right? They're putting up these new permanent invisible walls.
Yeah, locking it down.
But then, in the same breath, they've just published the official roadmap for drone normalization.
Which is huge.
It's massive. It lays out the physical and digital infrastructure we need to open the rest of the sky to, operations we've really only theorized about for the last decade.
Right. And if you're an enterprise program manager listening to this, navigating this new complexity, that is the key to unlocking massive commercial value.
Exactly.
Because if you misread these signals, you risk grounding your entire fleet. So let's start with the closing of the skies.
Let's do it.
So the FAA has put forward this sweeping proposal to create permanent drone restrictions around critical infrastructure. Yeah. And we are talking about a massive footprint here.
Oh, yeah. It's not a small list.
No. It's electric power generation facilities, substations, water treatment plants, oil refineries,
chemical manufacturing, dams, certain government installations, basically everything that keeps the country running.
Right.
And we really need to clarify what that means, because for operators who are used to just, checking for TFRs, temporary flight restrictions before flight, this is a very different regulatory beast.
Totally different, because a TFR expires, right?
Exactly. A TFR is tied to like a presidential visit or a stadium sporting event on a Sunday. It goes away.
Okay, so to visualize this, it's not the FAA putting down like a temporary traffic cone that you steer around for the weekend.
No.
Think of it more like establishing a permanent, invisible national park over a local chemical plant. Like, you might be able to physically drive your truck right up to the front gate, but the federal government has declared the airspace above it heavily restricted.
And your standard operating license does not give you permission to cross that boundary.
Which is a huge point, because I think a lot of people just assume that holding a Part 107 commercial certificate is like this golden ticket to bypass local restrictions.
Yeah, and that assumption is going to get operators into serious trouble. A Part 107 certificate does not automatically grant you access to special airspace designations. Even with a valid commercial license, an operator will still need to apply for a separate, specific FAA authorization. And the complication is that the technical portal for this authorization, the turnaround times, the specific conditions for each individual facility, they haven't even been standardized yet.
So we are looking at a scenario where the restriction exists before the access pathways are even fully built?
Exactly. It's a logistical nightmare in the short term.
Wait, hold on. Let's look at how this survives contact with reality, right? Specifically in public safety.
Okay, yeah.
If you are a local fire chief and you're trying to deploy a drone to provide thermal overwatch on an active multi-alarm fire at a chemical processing plant.
Right, which happens.
Yeah. You are not going to sit around waiting for a 2-week email authorization from the FAA.
No, of course not.
The building is actively burning. So how does this rule function in a real, live emergency response scenario?
Well, see, the friction between immediate operational need and federal security protocols is basically the biggest hurdle in this entire proposal.
I mean, I can see why.
Because the federal government is legitimately concerned about adversarial drone use near highly sensitive sites. You know, a commercial drone with a payload drop mechanism poses a massive kinetic threat to an oil refinery.
Right, the security risk is real.
It is. However, for that fire chief, this means reactive deployment is just no longer an option.
So what do they do?
It means establish emergency procedures, memorandums of understanding with these facilities, and prearranged blanket FAA authorizations are going to become mandatory.
Wow.
Yeah, you will need the digital paperwork cleared months before the fire ever starts.
That's a massive shift in how departments operate. And it spills over into private enterprise too, doesn't it?
Oh, heavily.
Like, think about a utility company that runs automated daily drone inspections of their own power substation.
Right, over their own property.
Yeah. They now have to factor federal authorization into their routine maintenance workflows. Or even a construction firm building a subdivision next door to a water treatment plant.
Oh, they'll have to jump through compliance hoops just to run a standard photogrammetry mission over their own dirt. And this is why the current phase of this is so critical. Because right now, this is currently a notice of proposed rulemaking.
Okay, so it's not final yet.
It is not final. The FAA is legally required to accept and review public comments right now.
Okay, that's crucial for you listeners to understand.
Very. If a local emergency management agency feels this authorization process will cripple their disaster response times, or, if a utility company calculates this will significantly delay grid maintenance,
then they need to speak up.
This is the legal window to submit those specific data-backed concerns to the agency in writing.
Right. You have to get on the record before the rule goes final. So, okay, while the FAA is putting up these invisible fences around infrastructure, they are simultaneously paving the way for us to utilize the vast open spaces between them.
Yes, the other side of the coin.
Which is wild. These strict no-fly zones make a lot more sense when you realize the FAA is preparing for drones to fly for dozens of miles, completely, entirely out of the pilot's physical sight.
Right, because we are looking at the most significant regulatory milestone of the year here. The FAA has officially published their drone normalization strategy.
And this is the big one.
It is. This is the comprehensive policy roadmap outlining exactly how the agency plans to integrate drones into the national airspace at scale.
And the absolute core of this document, right, is the formal pathway toward routine beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS operations.
Exactly, BVLOS.
Because if you are running an enterprise program right now, you already know the brutal limitation of Part 107.
Oh, the visual tether.
Right, the visual tether, the requirement to keep the aircraft within your naked eye visual line of sight. It's basically the ultimate bottleneck to your return on investment.
It really is, because you simply cannot scale a 50-mile pipeline inspection.
Or neighborhood medical delivery.
Or massive agricultural mapping, right? If a human being has to physically walk alongside the drone, it defeats the purpose.
It totally defeats the purpose. So Part 108 is the rule book that shatters that limitation.
Yeah, the normalization strategy gives us the engineering and regulatory framework for how we actually achieve that. And it outlines a phased approach, which is smart.
What does the first phase look like?
So, for example, they are looking really closely at allowing BVLOS flights that occur very close to the ground or within a certain distance of existing structures, like 50 feet above a power line for miles.
Oh, I see. Because the logic is that manned aircraft, like a Cessna, shouldn't be flying 50 feet above a power line anyway.
Exactly. So the risk of a mid-air collision is drastically reduced.
If Part 107 is like flying your drone by looking out the window, Part 108 sounds like flying a commercial jet purely on instruments.
That's exactly what it is.
Because the moment you move away from those shielded operations into open airspace, the pilot who's staring at a screen 5 miles away cannot see if a helicopter is converging on the drone.
Right. They have no visual context.
So what does the day-to-day operational reality actually look like for a Part 108 pilot?
Well, the job description fundamentally changes. You go from stick and rudder flying to advanced systems management. Because the roadmap heavily relies on the evolution of detect and avoid, or DA, technology. And we're not just talking about bolting a better camera onto the drone.
Right. A camera isn't enough.
It requires true sensor fusion, The drone will need to combine optical tracking, onboard radar, and ADS-B data.
That's the transponder data manned aircraft use.
It needs all of that to calculate collision trajectories in real time. So if a helicopter approaches, the drone's onboard computer must autonomously calculate and execute an avoidance maneuver without waiting for the pilot's latency-delayed input.
Because even a 1-second delay could be catastrophic. And none of this works without the foundational layer we've been talking about for years, which is standard remote ID.
Oh, remote ID is the absolute digital linchpin of Part 108. It has been a requirement for new commercial drones since late 2023.
Right, the digital license plate.
Yeah. The drone broadcasts its registration number, its location, altitude, and trajectory in real time.
And the FAA's roadmap makes it explicitly clear you cannot have invisible, highly autonomous drones sharing the airspace with passenger aircraft unless those drones are loudly and continuously broadcasting exactly who and where they are.
To the entire local airspace network.
Exactly.
Which is huge. I mean, analysts are estimating that unlocking BVLOS will create tens of billions of dollars in commercial applications.
It completely transforms the drone from a localized flying camera into a scalable logistics and data gathering network.
But to safely fly a drone 10 miles out of sight under Part 108, the standard radio controller you pull out of a hard case today is completely inadequate.
Which brings us to the invisible infrastructure required to make this roadmap a reality. Spectrum and data.
Yeah, because the physical hardware of the drone is almost taking a backseat to the invisible infrastructure keeping it in the air.
It really is.
Like this week, we saw a major formal push from the wireless industry. They're aggressively lobbying the FCC for dedicated drone spectrum access.
Okay, so to understand why this matters to you guys, we have to look at how we fly today. Most commercial drones operate on ISM bands, specifically 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz.
Right.
Which means we are essentially flying $50,000 enterprise sensor payloads using the exact same unregulated radio frequencies that my neighbor uses to run their Wi-Fi router and their baby monitor.
It sounds insane when you say it out loud, but it's true. And the physics of those frequencies are terrible for BVLOS.
Why is that?
Well, the 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz bands rely on a proprietary line-of-sight radio link between your controller and the aircraft. So as soon as you fly behind a dense tree canopy, a concrete building, or simply push out far enough that the curvature of the earth or ground clutter interrupts the signal,
you experience massive multipath interference.
And signal degradation, the link drops.
Right, which you can't have if the drone is 5 miles away.
Exactly. So the wireless industry is arguing that the only viable solution for operations at scale is cellular networks, specifically LTE and 5G.
So the push is to transition from local radio controllers to flying drones over the cell network. But how does 5G actually solve the line of sight issue?
Because 5G networks utilize dedicated licensed spectrum, meaning there is no interference from consumer devices.
Okay, no baby monitors.
Right, no baby monitors. But more importantly, it leverages a concept called network slicing.
Network slicing?
Yeah. A cellular provider can essentially carve out a dedicated, highly reliable, ultra-low latency slice of their network, specifically for drone command and control link. The drone doesn't connect to your controller anymore. It connects to the nearest cell tower and seamlessly hands off that connection to the next tower as it flies across the state.
Just exactly the same way your cell phone maintains a call while you drive down the highway.
Exactly.
But, it's not just the radio waves that are evolving here. It's the data that the drone is actually transmitting over those waves.
Yes. The data layer.
We saw a very strategic move this week. Air Data, which is one of the largest drone fleet management and flight data platforms, officially joined the Commercial Drone Alliance ahead of the Part 108 rollout.
And that signals a massive shift in regulatory focus.
It really does.
Because Part 108 will not just govern the physical aircraft, it will heavily regulate the data ecosystem. Operating BVLOS will require standardized flight logging, mandatory automated anomaly reporting,
and likely the real-time sharing of telemetry data directly with FAA compliance systems. So let me ask you this. If the physical drone is almost becoming secondary, like if it's flying an autonomous predetermined path, the cellular connection is handling the command link, and the data platform is handling the federal compliance.
Yeah.
Are enterprise operators prepared for the reality that their software choice is now just as critical, if not more critical, than their hardware choice?
Well, I don't think they are, but they need to wake up to it. because the most sophisticated hardware in the world becomes a very expensive paperweight if it cannot seamlessly interface with FAA systems.
Right.
The spectrum allocation decisions the FCC makes this year and the data standards the FAA finalizes are going to dictate the hardware standard for the entire industry once Part 108 drops.
So your software ecosystem, your ability to securely log and transmit data is quite literally becoming your legal license to operate.
That's exactly it.
Wow. Okay, so while Washington maps out the invisible data highways of the future, local operators still have to buy hardware today to get the job done. And the clock is aggressively ticking on a massive geopolitical hardware decision. The FCC is currently conducting a formal review of DJI's status on the covered list.
Right, the covered list. This is a roster maintained by the FCC of communications equipment and services deemed to pose an unacceptable risk to U.S. national security.
And DJI, which obviously holds 70+% of the global commercial and consumer drone market?
Easily.
They were placed on this list back in 2020.
Yes. And what operators really need to understand here is that being on the covered list does not make it illegal to fly a DJI drone.
Right. You won't get arrested for flying your Mavic.
Exactly. But it makes it illegal to purchase DJI equipment using federal funds.
And the downstream effect of that is massive.
Yeah.
Because DJI is deeply integrated into public safety and utility workflows.
Oh, deeply.
If your local county emergency management agency relies on grants from FEMA or the Department of Homeland Security to fund their drone program, those federal grant dollars cannot be used to purchase a DJI drone or any of its payloads.
Right. And the FCC's current review will determine whether to keep DJI on the list, modify the restrictions, or potentially escalate them.
And the critical deadline here, listen up, is that the public comment window for this review closes on May 11th, 2026.
Which is practically tomorrow.
Yes. This is creating immense procurement anxiety for public safety agencies that have spent the last 5 years building their standard operating procedures, their training modules, their whole accessory ecosystem entirely around DJI's platform.
It's a huge problem. But if an agency is forced to pivot away from DJI because of these federal funding restrictions, the market landscape is shifting to accommodate them.
What are the alternatives right now?
We are seeing major pushes from companies like Skydio, which leans heavily into AI-driven autonomy.
Right. Skydio's huge.
Parrot is a major player, specifically with their French-manufactured Anafi USA line, which is explicitly cleared for U.S. government use.
Okay.
And there's a rapidly growing coalition of smaller NDAA-compliant manufacturers rushing to fill this enterprise void.
So the urgency here is simple. If your organization relies on federal grants, you must submit your formal comments to the FCC at fcc.gov by May 11, and you need to finalize your alternative procurement strategy today.
Yeah, you absolutely cannot wait until a disaster strikes to discover your grant funding won't cover replacement batteries for your primary fleet.
No, you'll be grounded when you're needed most.
Exactly.
Now look, with all this talk of future roadmaps, strict data compliance, geopolitical hardware bans, I know the landscape can feel overwhelmingly complex.
It is a lot to take in.
But I want to ground this. Incredible, highly effective commercial work is happening right now, using the rules we already have. Look at the South Walton Mosquito Control District in Florida.
Oh, they are a brilliant blueprint for municipal adoption.
They really are.
The South Walton District is deploying these heavy-lift drones for aerial surveillance of standing water and for the highly targeted application of larvicide in remote swamp areas.
Which is brilliant, because they are solving a brutal physical problem. Mapping standing water on foot through dense Florida brush is incredibly dangerous.
And inefficient.
Super inefficient. Delivering larvicide by hand or by truck is slow. But by utilizing drones, they bypass the terrain entirely.
And what makes them such a perfect model program is that they aren't waiting for Part 108 or 5G network slicing to deliver value.
Right, they're doing it today.
Right now.
Yeah.
They identified a crystal clear, highly specific use case. They procured appropriate task-specific hardware. They developed repeatable standard operating procedures.
And their pilots are operating legally and effectively under the current Part 107 frameworks.
Exactly. It just proves that you don't need a futuristic BVLOS waiver to build a highly effective, specialized commercial drone program that saves a municipality time and money today.
That's the perfect takeaway. The Part 107 certificate remains the immediate legal entry point for any agency wanting to operate commercially right now.
Absolutely.
So let's briefly synthesize the sheer volume of information we've unpacked today. We are essentially watching a total reorganization of the airspace.
Yeah, on every level.
The FAA is simultaneously closing the skies around critical infrastructure, while dropping this comprehensive roadmap to open the skies for beyond visual line-of-sight operations.
We're transitioning away from local radio frequencies toward dedicated 5G cellular spectrum.
And we are facing an immediate May 11 deadline regarding DJI and the FCC's covered list.
The industry is just maturing at a breakneck pace. And as we process this shift toward BVLOS, I just want you to consider this final thought.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the future of commercial drone operations relies entirely on 5G network slicing for command and control,
Right.
and continuous data streams for detect and avoid compliance, do the major telecom companies effectively become the new privatized air traffic control for low-altitude airspace?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If a cellular provider experiences a localized network outage, does that instantly ground every delivery drone, medical transport, and pipeline inspection in a 3-state radius?
That's a wild thought.
We are watching aviation merge with telecommunications. Will the commercial drone operator of tomorrow look less like a traditional pilot and more like a network systems manager? Because the power dynamics of the airspace are about to fundamentally shift.
That is a staggering reality that every enterprise leader needs to prepare for. And to navigate that future, you have to master the present.
And if your organization is grappling with these exact challenges, whether you are building a program from scratch, transitioning your fleet away from DJI, or preparing your data architecture for a BVLOS future, visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification.
Make sure to check the show notes and the blog post links in the description for all the FAA dockets, FCC filings, and industry reports we referenced today. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending it with us. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss a new episode every week, and we will catch you on the next one.